everyone, it's Shane Conto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film and making our way downtown through Spielberg Town and making our way to some of his less known films, which one I hadn't seen before prepping for this episode. And this time I have my pal Jim here, who's quite becoming a frequent flyer on the channel. So Jim, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Shane. I want to collect my miles soon. I got to use those.
Yeah, you could use them to take a trip back to Jersey.
Back to Jersey through Spielberg Town.
Through Spielberg Town. Our stop this week is Empire of the Sun. A young English boy struggles to survive under Japanese occupation of China during World War II, starring Christian Bale as a child. And so we'll be getting to that. But those who haven't seen this show before, we have 3 segments. We have coming attractions, then our feature of the week, and then some recommendations for all of you wonderful people out there. Now, this is a robust week of releases. We have an expansion of Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. We have a couple wide releases with that Crawdad Sings movie. Paws of Fury and Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. But Jim, what's the movie that's sticking out to you most that you want to check out?
So the movie that I would be most likely to see is The Gray Man, starring Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas. I'm just going to bring it up and read down the list here. Somebody named Danush, Billy Bob Thornton, and directed by Anthony Russo. Looks like a kind of a drive-ish character for Ryan Gosling, which is going to be fun to see. Lots of action, cool visuals, and I'm low-key in love with Ana de Armas, so like anything she does is a win for me. It looks like a fun action film. I don't expect too much from it, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's definitely giving off those kinds of vibes. And I do want to clarify for all of those who do want to check out the film, it's in theaters July 15th. It will be on Netflix July 22nd. So if you do want to wait till it's on Netflix, just wait a week. But if you do want to check it out in a theater and you can find it, it is playing this weekend. Netflix doesn't have a tendency to get most of their films in big theaters, because I don't think AMC and Regal are really fans of Netflix, so they don't really carry their movies. But if you get a chance to go check out The Gray Man, and it happens to be playing at a theater near you, check it out. I'm definitely excited for it. The Russo brothers have an interesting track record, because obviously I feel like the things that people know the most for Community, and then all the Marvel movies that they did, including the last 2 Avengers films. A lot of people hated Cherry, their last film that came out with Tom Holland. I liked it more than most people, but not a lot of people were fans of it.
I did not see Cherry, and I need to apologize to the listeners for saying that Joe Russo was directing Solo. Of course he's not directing Solo.
Yeah. The 2 of them are a package deal, and it's not, they don't have that whole Directors Guild BS like they did in the 80s and 90s when the Coen brothers could not co-direct their movies. Even though, they did. But also 21 Bridges was fine with Chadwick Boseman in it. So like, I feel like the cast in this definitely has my attention. The movie that I was most excited for going in to see, and I've actually got a chance to see it, and my review should be out, is The Deer King, which is a new anime. 2022 for anime releasing in America, because technically none of these films released originally in 2022 because they came out in Japan earlier. But there is quite a few, Popel of Chimney Town, Belle, Bubble, that wound up on Netflix, and now The Deer King. There's a lot of really good anime coming out this year, and I think there's a new Dragon Ball Z movie coming out, and they do shockingly well at the box office, so I wouldn't be surprised if all of the Dragon Ball fans are flocking to the theaters when that comes out. But I'm a Deer King has a lot of Princess Mononoke vibes, very hard fantasy kind of film, and I was really excited about checking it out, and I was pretty satisfied with it. Um, it's a little long and it does a lot of world building, but it's still a pretty cool fantasy movie. So definitely would recommend that along with like the 50 other movies coming out this weekend. So there's just a lot of things both on they're coming out on Netflix, Amazon has some movies coming out on Prime, and then stuff in theaters. Still waiting for Fire of Love to come out around me, which is a new documentary about two scientists who weather an erupting volcano together.
Nice.
And
That
they
sounds
went,
actually very cool.
yeah, it's a new National Geographic documentary. And I don't think they made it out alive because, like, this film's like the footage is decades old, and I think they finally were able to like pull this together and make it into like a finished film. And they basically are like, why are we doing this? Because somebody needs to investigate these phenomena, and they were willing to sacrifice their lives to try to do it.
Wow.
And that's some crazy stuff right there. So some interesting documentaries coming too. But for our feature of the week, we, like I described before, we have Empire of the Sun, which is a history war drama with Christian Bale as a young man, Jim, who winds up being separated from his parents and winds up in a concentration camp from the Japanese as they invade China because Jim's a little rich boy. And his parents are part of the aristocracy that are kind of like, we run China. And it's like Japanese are like, no, we run China now. And because, basically Japan just run amok all through Asia during World War II. When most people realize like the Nazis were swarming all through Europe, the Japanese were taking over most of Asia. And this film is very interesting because it takes the perspective of a young boy's outlook on all of this and the loss of innocence. I feel like that's like the best way to describe what this story really is.
Yeah, we're talking about a coming of age tale really at its core, right? And the war just kind of provides a setting and a backdrop. Um, I mean, it's a very dramatic setting, right? Anything set around World War II, anything set around uh, especially World War II is going to be um, I don't know. It's I don't want to call it a trope, but it's not unique in if you told somebody it's a coming of age story about a boy during World War II, like it could be any number of movies, right? So
Mhm.
like he he does have to do something a little bit different with this one. But yeah, Jim was or Jamie rather. Jamie
Yeah.
is a little piece of poop, let's say.
Yes. He is a very entitled little rich kid. And
Indeed.
boy, does Christian Bale like it's crazy to think because like at this point in 2022, all of these years later, what 34 years later, almost 35 years later, Christian Bale is one of the biggest actors in the world and regarded as one of the most talented method actors we have working today. And in this film, you see him as a child, and he's doing a really great job as a child, um, getting attention. And like, the tricky thing is it's really hard to get great performances out of child actors and also for them to make them feel natural, like they're an actual child. Because you have the precocious child characters that are like they sound like they're 30, the way that they're talking and stuff like that. But like he's a bratty little shit, honestly.
He is. He is.
And
And it's I mean that's I think supposed to be. It's written that way, right?
yeah,
I was really surprised to see some mannerisms, maybe some of his facial expressions. They didn't change too much between,
no,
you know, child actor Christian Bale and American Psycho or Batman Christian Bale. A lot of it's still there. So he was very much formed
mhm.
already as an actor when he stepped into this role. And I think thousands of kids auditioned for this
I
role, so
would
he must have done something special.
I would imagine because like to give some context to this, because like this is Spielberg getting into late 80s. He ruled Hollywood in the early to mid 80s. He had Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Temple of Doom, and then he's taking some of these chances with The Color Purple, which I talked about last week, and now Empire of the Sun. And this is definitely one of his most under the radar films because like I'd never seen this before. And like I've seen most Spielberg films.
And it's
And
not, I wonder why that is. I don't know if you have a guess as to why people tend to forget about this one.
I feel like it's the kind of thing where it's like, how many World War II movies has he made? I guess two. Which one's going to be more memorable 6
Well,
years
he's
later?
done Private Ryan,
Oh well,
and then Schindler's List.
yeah.
This one, that's at least three.
So like,
Something about concentration camps. I don't know why Steven Spielberg has
well,
this fetish for concentration
well, to
camps.
be honest, I think well, obviously, and I talked about this a lot last week because Color Purple doesn't seem like a personal story for Steven Spielberg to be telling, but as a Jewish American, Schindler's List makes a lot more sense.
It does.
Um,
No, it totally does.
and Saving Private Ryan is arguably one of the greatest war films of all time. Schindler's List is arguably one of the best films about the Holocaust of all time. And this one, I wouldn't go as far as saying like this is one of his great films. I feel like because like this is a 2.5 hour movie. I don't think this movie needed to be 2.5 hours.
I think it easily could have been 3 hours. I felt like, and this sign of the times maybe. Other movies that did this epic sprawl thing from the late
Mhm.
80s to the early 90s, I have similar complaints about. One of them being like Cider House Rules, for example. Um, Not really Forrest Gump so much, but Shawshank a little bit. I do get some Shawshank vibes here. There are scenes that are kind of rushed through in the middle of the movie because we need to get
Mhm.
to whatever the last act, or we need to whittle it down to 2 hours for the theater or whatever. um, I read through the first half of the book that this was based on yesterday, and it
Mhm.
helped me to fill in a few of the gaps that I felt are there in the film, like through the first half. Like I didn't really understand why Mrs. his roommate, Mrs. I feel like I wrote her name down here.
Is
The
it? Are you talking about Mrs. Victor?
This is Victor. Thank you. He says her
Miranda
name so many
Richardson's
times.
character.
Mrs. Victor. You can see right away that she doesn't like Jim, and they don't really give us a reason for her dislike of Jim. But like it's explained a lot more thoroughly, in the pages. But
I feel like her character serves one purpose in this movie, and it's for when she's no longer in the movie.
yeah, it's her death scene, right,
Yeah.
where the bomb also drops, which is a pretty big scene.
Yep.
But
I feel like they realize it's like, well, we're going to utilize this character for one very specific purpose to make one very specific point. Why go into all that extra effort to flesh this character out? Which is a shame because Miranda Richardson's a talented actress too. And like, she just has that job to do in this. I have a really weird connection that I had in my head watching this, and I want to put this out there and hear what you have to think about it. I get at certain times slight Pinocchio vibes out of some of the moments in this film, and very specifically, I feel like Basie and what's Joe Pantoliano's character's name?
I just kept
Uh,
calling him Pants in my head. Was it Frank?
Frank. They have that vibe of that fox and that cat from Pinocchio really like trying to lead him astray in ways.
Mm.
And I kept getting that kind of vibe from it. Obviously, like that's just one little small part of Pinocchio. And like his relationship with John Malkovich's character is a big part of this movie. And like they wind up being together for probably like 2/3 of this movie.
Right.
Because he meets them pretty early on, that whole scene with Joey Pants, like chucking him into his truck and stuff like that. And it's very interesting because it's like he doesn't have his parents, and his parents raised him in a very specific way, which I don't think he would ever be a very well functioning human being in most society. He would
Agree,
function very well.
especially not in wartime China,
No,
in a Japanese internment camp.
I'm sure he would function perfectly fine in his high society aristocracy that he probably thought he would be spending most of his life in. But like it's interesting how some of these characters influence his perception of the world. And I feel like the character that he spends the most time with is John Malkovich's character, who has a very specific perception of things.
Agree. Yeah, he's very pragmatic, right? If there's
Mhm.
one word I would have to pick for Malkovich's character, it would be pragmatic.
Which also John Malkovich is great in everything. So like just seeing him pop up in this, it's like he plays that character really well. Joe Pantoliano plays Frank very well. He's just like a live wire of a lot of emotions. And Baby's just such an asshole. He's just like
He is. I felt
you'll
so bad for Frank.
you'll eat when I tell you. I just I think I fell in love with John Malkovich and Burn After Reading. I think that was one of the first things I saw him in. And just so funny in that movie.
Very
And
funny.
he has like you said, a very pragmatic perception of the world and a very, very specific vibe to him. Like he kind of keeps it cool most of the time in this film, and he has a very tough exterior kind of thing. Like he doesn't show that he's sweating a whole lot this whole
Yeah, he's very
situation.
stoic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
don't let him see you sweat, I guess. That does make sense. If anybody senses weakness, like when I don't know how much detail should I give? When he has to go to the infirmary and certain other characters turn against him.
mhm,
It's that sense of I think he knows that. He's pretty wise in the ways of the world, I think. The University of Life, I think, is what Jim
yeah.
called it. And he's definitely studying John Malkovich's character, Basie. He's definitely um, I mean, he is a surrogate father. Could we? Would you agree? We can say
Yeah.
that pretty
To
safely,
be
right?
to be frank, like I don't know how much of a father figure his real father was. Cause like I'm sure he like was raised by well one note. When he goes back to his home after he split up from his parents, there's a couple of really great things that happen in that moment. The one woman who he's like, help me, and she just straight up slaps him across the face. I'm just like,
She hit him hard too.
I'm like, how long do you think she wanted to do that?
Oh, years.
Years. Like she's been like one day, and that day came. I think one of the most strikingly beautiful moments in the whole entire film is when he goes, that's his parents' bedroom, and there's all that like white powder on the floor, and you can see claw marks through it. You could see footsteps through it. And then just the wind blows in and starts blowing it all off the floor and like erasing all the evidence. I'm like, that's some Spielberg right there.
Yeah, I kind of was convinced that his parents were well, that his mom at least was dead. So
Yeah.
I don't know what happened in all that talcum powder on the floor, but
Yeah.
apparently, she's not to spoil the ending of the movie, but there is a happy ending,
Happy-ish.
which happy-ish. Yeah, he does look dead in the eyes at the end of this film, doesn't he?
like doll eyes. It's one of those kinds of things where his journey is complete by the end of this film, because he goes from this wide-eyed, ignorant, naive, spoiled brat to hollow, honestly, and just world beaten, to the point where it's like that kid saw way more than he should have ever had to see in his life. And there's one particular moment later in the film where I think that pushes him over the edge. And like Spielberg doesn't pull punches at certain points in the film, because like I feel like most people are like, it's a Spielberg movie, probably like sugarcoats some stuff. And I don't think people give Spielberg enough credit that some of his movies, he really goes there. I'm like, you obviously haven't watched Schindler's List. Because God, that movie. And then obviously like Saving Private Ryan, that doesn't pull any punches. That's one of the most brutal and gruesome war movies you'll probably ever watch.
That opening sequence I heard was giving PTSD to a lot of the vets in the audience.
Yeah, my mom wanted to take my grandpa. Apparently, he wouldn't go. He's just like,
Understandable.
because like I remember watching war movies with my grandpa, but like I watched The Great Escape, I watched The Dirty Dozen, which are like really Hollywoodized versions of like the war.
Very
Saving
much
Private
so.
Ryan is not that. It's brutal and very realistic in many ways, and you have to see a lot of hard things, and there's some hard things in this too. It's just not that kind of movie, and it's also something where it's just like Spielberg crafts this whole entire film from the perspective of a kid, and you're seeing it from the perspective of a kid. There's some dark moments, like him trying to help out, was it Dr. Rollins? Yeah. Nigel Haver's character, and he's like trying to keep that woman alive, and
Right.
just stares at him. It's just like,
There are quite a few corpses in this film,
yeah,
which maybe as like viewers of Hollywood we are desensitized to, but like yeah, there's a lot, and it's rated PG.
which
Yeah, it's a PG rating.
did PG-13 exist yet?
I don't know. I was going to ask you.
Because one of the reasons why they had PG-13 was because of Temple of Doom, which came out
Just a couple years before?
3 years before this.
Okay.
Okay, so when did PG-13 start?
As I was watching this movie in the
Oh,
library,
1984. I'm
84.
surprised that this kept a PG rating.
There were a couple of moments where I was like kind of looking around me going, I hope no toddlers are wandering by. Because I
Yeah.
mean, it is a violent film by definition almost. And yeah, there are some disturbing images. There's also a lot of really beautiful imagery
Yeah.
too, from like the sparks in the airfield to that scene that we referenced with the atomic bomb going off in the
Yes.
background. The final scene too. There's a lot of really really beautiful imagery in this movie.
And that's another thing to give Spielberg some credit for, is he's a real auteur director. Like I think a lot of people just write him off as a populist mainstream filmmaker, and like it's because he makes movies that everybody can love. But the thing is, he elevates them with extreme technical prowess. Like Jaws wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for Steven Spielberg, and like Raiders of the Lost Ark would not be as long lasting and iconic if it wasn't for Steven Spielberg. He knows how, he chooses to play in a different kind of sandbox than some of his peers like Scorsese or Coppola, because they were all peers. Along with George Lucas. George Lucas and Spielberg went in one direction, and Scorsese and Coppola to a point went in one direction, the different direction. Coppola, I don't think, really made it quite out of the 70s, still making quality films. Very sporadically over the past 40 years has he actually made something worth watching. But obviously, Spielberg and Scorsese are still doing it. Both of them have new films coming out in 2022, which is crazy.
Right. Which Spielberg movie is coming up
He
in
has The
this year?
Fableman, which is rough. It's supposedly roughly based off of his own childhood in New Mexico.
Interesting.
So it's a pretty personal film. And then Scorsese's making Killers of the Flower Moon, which is the
Yes.
dawn of the FBI and a Western and dealing with Native American and American conflict. So like different speed. But the fact that like they're still kicking and they're still going and making quality films. And this film is 34 years old, 30, almost 35 years old. And there's still a lot of, like, you watch this film, there's some beautiful shots in it. There's beautiful visuals. There's one scene that sticks with me because how committed Christian Bale is in it is when Basie basically like rejects him for other kids. Is in the back of a truck and he's desperately trying to get himself in the back of this truck. And when he finds out that they're trying to find this place that he knows where it is, he's just screaming and they hit him. And he's like bleeding and like screaming, screaming, and screaming. I'm just like, damn kid, calm down. But like, there's something about that scene. There's so much energy in it. And, you know, that's Christian Bale.
I was kind of reminded of Leo from Basketball Diaries, I think is the name of the movie.
I haven't seen that one.
But go ahead, finish your thought.
Well, I was just going to say, is like, I feel like that scene has a lot of energy and really stands out in the film. And just the way that Spielberg frames him standing on top of the truck and just like the shots of it make it really stand out.
Yeah. I think the shot of him saluting the Japanese airmen at night in the airfield with all the sparks flying around,
Yeah.
that's memorable for me. Probably the number one most memorable like imagery would be when it's kind of two scenes. So he's singing the Japanese anthem, I believe is what it is. He's singing along with them, the kamikaze pilots, and they are mounting up. And then immediately the American attack comes and they get blown to bits and there's bombs exploding all around. And I believe he's up on the roof is what he's doing. He's like shouting about the Cadillac of the skies. That scene is probably, if I had to choose one that stands out from the rest to me, that would be it.
And there's a lot of tension in that scene too, with the Dr. Rollins character trying to get up there to get him, because like he's just completely delusional at that point. It's like, kid, you're gonna die. Like, get the hell off the roof.
Is that his first time seeing like airplanes in action doing what they were designed to do, to blow things up?
I think so. And that's an interesting point that you bring up, because up to this point he's had this like this worship of the pilot and the pilots, and he has this like very pristine perspective on them, and then he finally sees the violence that they cause.
Yeah, that is the tension that I read in the scene. Like he is excited to see what these planes in action, because he's been obsessed with planes as a boy. It's a very boyish obsession, is it not?
Yeah.
With the airplanes. Mm-hmm. And he actually gets to see them and they're killing people all around him. And I think it kind of resolves itself at the end, because he kind of, it seems to me like he expected a big reaction of himself because he built himself up to this moment for so many years. But final line of the scene is, I don't remember what my parents look like. So I think all of the like the title I think was called, what's the word? Ecstasy or something like that. Like he's he expected it to be a big joyous moment, so he had to act that way.
Mhm.
And then when he's like looking back at the boy he used to be, to like look for some kind of reference point, when he realizes what's actually going on, he's like, I don't even remember what my parents look like. Why why did I love these planes so much?
Yeah. And the whole entire journey that he's on is stripping away all those perceptions and perspectives that he had in life, what was built up with this very sheltered, privileged life that he had. And then he's just living in the dirt and living a life of constraints and imprisonment. And basically, he only has like this one little glimpse of like the young Japanese boy who like he has some kind of connection with. And then what the film does is leverage that to really shatter the innocence that he has. And like at that point in the film, when like he's found, he's gone. And that's why it's such a bittersweet final scene. Is like it's a scene that you should be like, there should be rousing John Williams score, big emotional moment, but Spielberg is mature enough to show like it's not that clean, and it's not going to be like, hey, this is such a wonderful moment, let's put all the trauma aside that we've gone through over the past 2.5 hours. It's like there's going to be a lot of healing that has to happen first
For
before this
sure.
could be like a truly happy ending.
For sure. And instead of going with the big John Williams score, like you said, there's a choir. It's a major key. You can tell things are okay, but like his father doesn't even recognize him at first, right? Doesn't he walk right by him?
Right by him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's a good thing the mother was there. He might have never been found at all.
Yep. Yeah, if dad's just there, oh, well, he did do the dad thing where he barely looks and just goes around the outside. And it's like, I couldn't find it. And the mom's like, my son. Son's just like, who the F are you? Actually, that's word for word exactly what happens in the movie.
That's a great, yeah, that's a great monologue. He does kind of just stand off to the side, but that's a very British thing, right? Keep
Yeah.
stiff upper lip, don't show emotion. Like,
Well, and especially because it's this high society um, family too, where it's just like, it's like, good job, son. Good boy. And
right,
it's
well
just
done,
like,
good lad. Yeah.
good lad, don't touch you. Goodbye.
Don't they say? Don't they say? So his father, like you said, his father's not. His father is bred and trained to function very well in a certain slice of society, right? And Basie kind of fills, I don't know, a survival role that like Jim wasn't taught how to be street smart. He wasn't taught how to fend for himself. You know, this was never supposed to happen. So Basie kind of gives him that. I feel like part of his admiration of the Japanese pilots are that he, like his father would never have climbed into a plane and gone off to war. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah.
Um, and what's interesting is I don't know if Basie could do the other life.
No,
Like,
I don't think
and
so either.
I think what's interesting is where does Basie wind up at the end of the film? Raiding shit and just like poaching relief packages and stuff like that. It's just like he has to find some kind of adventure and scrapping things together, because I don't, he feels like the kind of person, it's like you put him in like a regular job, he's not gonna know what the hell to do with himself.
He's a survivor. Yeah. Can we talk about that scene? How Spielberg, or I don't know who did the cinematography on this film. I'm actually going to look, but the way he's introduced to the camera, I really really enjoyed,
It was
because you don't see his face, like you said.
Alan Davio, who was the DP on The Color Purple, E.T. So it looked like he did a lot of the cinematography for Spielberg in that era. Oh, and it looks like
So that could have been a Spielberg call.
his last feature film was Van Helsing
Van Helsing,
in
really?
2004.
Saw that film in the theaters.
He also did Congo.
Saw that
Interesting.
film on VHS probably, like way back when.
Same year as Empire of the Sun did Harry and the Hendersons.
Okay, cool.
Interesting. Yeah, so it looks like he was Spielberg's DP for like the middle parts of the 80s.
Okay.
Because he has the same cinematographer now for like decades. But Yanis Kaminsky has been doing Spielberg's cinematography for years now.
Okay.
While you make your point about like the scene where they introduce him, I'm going to curiously look at who shot some other of these movies.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say that could have been a Spielberg call, like placing the camera there. We see, I'm trying to call it into my brain. We see Jim. We see a pan of food, rice, I guess.
Yeah.
And we see Baisie's hands. And I think it stays that way when he comes into the room. Baisie's checking him over, checking his teeth. We don't see his face for like a good while into the scene. And I don't know, was John Malkovich like a big star at this point? He looks super young. I know Ben Stiller was not.
Yeah,
for sure.
Where he pops up in the movie.
That was fun. I did not know Ben Stiller was going to be in this movie at all.
I did not either. And when he popped up, I'm like, that's interesting. I'm going to look up John Malkovich because I think a lot of his like big moments were in the 90s. Because he had some smaller roles, it looks like, in like The Killing Fields in 84. He was in The Glass Menagerie the same year as Empire of the Sun. So this seems like it's one of his first big ones. I think Dangerous Liaisons the next year was one of his like first big breakout roles that he
So
had.
casting here was pretty key. So an unknown Christian Bale and a little known John Malkovich. And Pantoliano, I don't even, as much as I enjoy him in the movie, I don't really think he's necessary in the second half. If only, really, it's the way that Basie treats him just kind of foreshadows what's going to happen to Jim later on. That's kind of how I see it, you know.
It's like that. It's not like a true connection, because like Basie goes off and does his own thing, and only really wants Jim back in the fold when he winds up there.
Yeah, when Jim winds up there, he's like, "Oh, okay, let's see what I can use this kid for. What benefit can I reap from this particular situation?" But then he's perfectly willing, like you said, to just abandon him and go. He's like Fagin. That's what I wrote down when I was watching this. Fagin from Oliver Twist.
Oliver, yeah. See, I think I got a similar vibe, and apparently my head just went to Pinocchio instead. For some reason.
I appreciate that though, because they totally are. In the book, it's stated very clearly that like Jamie's father raised him never to meet anybody like Basie, never to come into contact with anybody like Basie, who's, I mean, he's a survivor, but he's a borderline criminal, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like the last part we see him in, he's stealing a whole bunch of like relief aid Just like let's get as much of this as possible.
Yeah,
And I think
they were fighting over it literally.
well, and even on top of that, the men that he's traveling with and that he'll hold company with are even worse than he is.
Murderers. Yeah.
Yep.
We don't see him take anyone's life in the movie, do we? Like, I
No.
wouldn't put it past him, but I feel like he's the type who would uh, weasel somebody else into doing the dirty work for him. He keeps his hands clean, you know?
Yeah, I get that vibe too. And it is very interesting the different kinds of characters that we see throughout the film, and then the different kinds of characters that wind up influencing Jamie's life. And by the end, it's I feel like it is a fully satisfying and complete arc that this young man goes on that takes him from the most spoiled and naive perspective you could possibly have to one where life is just ground him down and there's not much left, which is really sad in that moment towards the end. But hopefully there's that little spark of hope that's there,
Yeah, yeah.
and that maybe
I
he
mean,
could have a
we
normal
do
life.
have to give him, maybe, we do have to give him a little credit, right? For maintaining, he's very buoyant. Like, he's got that manic energy all the
Yeah.
way through. Maybe it was that boyish obsession with the planes. Maybe that was part of what kind of made him passionate about going through each day. Um, I think especially as a rich privileged kid, like, the character deserves some credit.
Yeah.
Um, Even without Basie, he might have made it through, you know?
Yeah. And in the end, like for me, I feel like there's some times where this film loses some of my attention. But in general, it's a really well crafted film. It has some really strong performances. It has a very clear and impactful and resonant arc to it that we see this young boy go on this journey from start to finish and take to some places. And like we mentioned before, there's a lot of beautiful technical aspects to it too.
Yeah, yeah, there is. It's a big film.
Yep. This is because I looked into it. Originally, they wanted David Lean to direct this. And I'm like, fingerprints all over it. Like, this just looks like a David Lean type film. For those who don't know, director of Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge on the River Kwai. Like, it has that feel to it. And I think that's why Spielberg wanted to do it, is because he had such a passion for film, like David Lean's filmography, and he wanted to make like his David Lean type film.
Sure,
And I
sure.
think he captures that.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't know Lean was supposed to direct it. I think he would have done a great job with it, obviously, because we've seen what he can do. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I guess Spielberg hadn't made a film like this yet, had he? He hadn't made a World War II movie. He hadn't done a war movie.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing a lot of science fiction and adventure stuff.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's been interesting going through all of his filmography because like he even has films um starting off with like he had Duel, which is such a great thriller. Um The Sugarland Express, which is this crime thriller. Jaws, Close Encounters, 1941, not his best effort. His best effort. I'm excited for next week because, not gonna lie, it's my favorite. Personally, my favorite Spielberg film is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and
Nice.
I'm very excited to watch it next week.
That's the next one in the timeline
Yep.
chronologically. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, because it's that, and then I'll have Always, which is another one I haven't seen, Hook, and then August getting some heavy hitters with Jurassic Park and Schindler's List back to back.
Woof. Yeah, very, very different movies.
Same year, he created one of the greatest science fiction creature feature horror films in the history of cinema, and then absolutely devastated everybody with one of the best Holocaust films
Yeah, what a
ever
bummer.
made.
I've
And
I've seen Schindler's List twice, and I don't know if I'm ever going to watch it again. It's not a movie that needs to be rewatched
I think this
regularly.
is only the second time I'm watching it all the way
Okay.
through. When I rewatch it, and then Lost World Jurassic Park is right afterwards. So it's a Jurassic Park sandwich with Schindler's List right in the middle.
Okay. There you go. That's quite a meal, Shane,
Quite a
that you've
meal.
made for yourself.
But Jim, do you have any last thoughts on Empire of the Sun?
No, not really. I think it captured China pretty well. I was most interested before watching the movie to read that it was the first big budget film allowed into the People's Republic of China. So
Interesting.
there was a lot riding on this movie, and yet most of my Chinese friends, I've asked them, "Have you seen this movie? Have you heard of this movie?" Shrugs. Um, so yeah, I think it's does really well. It has similar kind of feel to The Last Emperor in scope and in scenery and in crowd control and things like that. Um, I think people deserve they need to give this movie a chance.
Hmm.
And I don't know why, it gets left behind.
It's interesting. I think it was a time in Spielberg's career where I feel like the color purple has enough attention because of Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah. But like in general, it's not one of Spielberg's biggest films. But he had then this, and yeah, he did have a diversion with a third Indiana Jones film, but then he had the film Always. There's a stretch here where it was like some of the not so well known Spielberg efforts, and then he just comes swinging with Hook is really well known for better for worse. Um, Obviously, I think it's a piece of a lot of people's childhoods. And
Mine
then, of course,
included, yes.
yeah. And then, of course, Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. And then, even in the late 90s, I think, because like he did like Amistad and stuff like that. But like, once he hits the 2000s, I think it's all like, these are big Spielberg movies. And I don't think he ever really diverted from that to some extent. I've even seen The Terminal, and I have a whole entire story for that when I get to that episode.
I'll have to check it out because I enjoyed that movie a lot.
I saw it in theaters and I have not seen it since. And I hated it because I wanted to see Shrek 2. So there you go. Now to wrap things up, we have some recommendations. So, Jim, what would you like to recommend to the lovely people listening?
So, following my previous thought, there are some special features on the DVD.
Okay.
Apparently, it's a full documentary called The China Odyssey. So, if I'd had more time, I would have loved to see that before we talk today. But I'd also like to recommend the Wasteland Reviewers season 6 Peaky Blinders review. I'm on episode 4, I think, and I just don't want that show to go, so I'm drawing it out.
I don't blame you. I think I binged the season in 2 days, and I'm just like,
I easily could have. I
yeah.
easily could have. I've been stopping myself and only leaving enough time in my day for one episode at the end of my day. So
Sometimes it is worth it to just like soak it in because that's a show that's going to be sorely missed when that's done because like the time period in between them have been getting longer, but when those 6 episodes of Peaky Blinders show up for a new season, damn, that's some good eats.
it just succeeds on so many levels. It's so good.
It makes me want to see Cillian Murphy finally become like a leading man in Hollywood because my God, his performance as Thomas Shelby is some of the best acting you'll see in television. And it's one of those kinds of shows where it's just like, it's such a great treat to find out who's going to be the antagonist each season. Because, like, Sam Neill in that first season, so great. I love Sam Neill so much. Underappreciated character actor Noah Taylor as Italian mobster in the second season. But of course, I think most people are going to remember season 2 is when they introduce Alfie Solomons. Because like Tom Hardy steals the show whenever he shows up in Peaky Blinders. Underappreciated third season with Patty Considine's disgusting priest. Oh, I hated that character so much. Adrian Brody's Italian mobster was an interesting choice for season 4 because I felt like it was just doing a Marlon Brando impression from The Godfather.
But you still had Alfie Solomons in like almost every scene, so it
Yeah, he came back with a vengeance in season 4. That was a big one for Alfie. And then the last 2 seasons with the rise of fascism and Sam Claflin. I hate him so much in this show.
Oswald Mosley?
Yes.
Okay.
He is so good at being like, I want to punch him in the face every time he shows up on screen because he has that British sensibility about him. He has this like slight air of elitism in just the way he stares at you and how he holds himself, and then of course the whole fascist bullshit.
And the way he pronounces all of his words, but the way he says fascist is just, it's on point.
And it was an interesting introduction of the IRA into season 6 too, and then some not so nice turn of events for some former family members who aren't necessarily on their side anymore.
Okay, don't say anymore. I will.
Well, you've seen season 5. You know which family.
Oh yes, yeah, I know.
For those who haven't watched the show, I don't want to give it away, but you know exactly who I'm talking about.
And the IRA have not gone away for season 6.
No, and they make their presence known in that first episode of season 6.
Yeah, I guess we should stress that everyone should watch Peaky Blinders season 6 and then go watch your review. Correct?
Correct.
Or is it spoiler free?
I don't do spoiler reviews
Good.
often. Like the only times I've done spoiler reviews is I was requested to do one for No Way Home, the new Spider-Man movie, so I did one because my God, that was so hard doing a review of that movie without spoiling anything.
Oh man, I don't even know if I could tell you what happens in that movie, like coherently. There was a lot going on in that film.
There was indeed a lot going on, and I feel like a lot of it shouldn't have been shown. There's certain things they definitely didn't show in the trailers. And then I feel like there's still things they should not have shown in the trailers. But one of the actors in his big mouth kind of wrote them into a corner. Looking at you, Alfred Molina.
Usually Tom Holland is the problem child, no?
It is. Apparently Alfred Molina is just... It's the two of... Well, it's Tom Holland and Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo is terrible, too.
He is, but he's having so much fun. I can't begrudge him any spoilery talk.
They specifically put Tom Holland and Benedict Cumberbatch together in interviews and stuff like that because Benedict Cumberbatch was watching him.
They gave him a minder, huh? That's really funny.
But like to make sure he didn't say anything.
Right.
I forgot to mention this earlier, but when you brought up Ryan Gosling, there's a big story going around right now because apparently he's in talks with Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are saying they thought he was going to be Nova.
I don't know Nova.
Nova's one of like the big like space characters.
Okay.
But Ryan Gosling came out and said today he's not interested in doing Nova. He really wants to play Ghost Rider. And I'm like,
really?
And I'm like, after seeing Drive, Place Beyond the Pines and all those kinds of things. I'm like,
Kind of makes sense, huh?
I could see that, and I would want to see that. I the what he's shown, because like Ryan Gosling's a very interesting actor because you get a couple different kinds of Ryan Gosling. You get douchey kind of like it's the character for the most part he plays in Crazy Stupid Love, but it's like, what's with the New Balance? What are you in a fraternity? It's just like, what are you looking at my schwans? Come on, we would have a problem if you've been just sitting here staring, looking at my schwans the whole entire time. And then he plays a similar character in like The Big Short, except he doesn't really have redeemable qualities in The Big Short. He's just an asshole.
Yeah.
And then or I think he's really like in real life, is he a quirky weirdo? Is like the nice guys.
Or Lars, yeah.
Or Lars in the real world.
Sensitive. Yeah.
And then because of Drive and Only God Forgives and Blade Runner 2049, he has this like brooding, silent, like outcast kind of thing down. And
No,
if
I
they
still
do that
haven't
with,
seen 2049, and I don't know why. I'm gonna make sure it's on my list. Please continue.
I'm just gonna admire my Blu-ray steelbook that I have of that because it's a like I don't tend to like splurge on stuff like that. I generally just get the movies so I can watch them, but that's a really nice case. But I'm interested to see him as Ghost Rider.
Okay.
I wish Nick Cage was in a better movie, two better movies, because like those were just bad movies.
I don't understand why the second one was ever made.
I don't know either, to be perfectly honest. So I have two recommendations that I want to make to everybody. One is related because it's Thor: Love and Thunder. I feel like I'm one of the only people who really, really enjoyed this movie because a lot of people were being very negative about it. Yes,
Really?
it has problems. It tries to be funny too much. Especially for the first 2/3 of the movie, it doesn't give itself time to breathe, but it's such a fun ride. Like, and honestly, the third act of the film really clicks and it has some major emotional moments. And Christian Bale's Gore the God Butcher is amazing.
You know,
Like,
I've seen stills, and I wouldn't have guessed that Christian Bale was under the makeup.
it's like when you see him in the film and you hear him talk and stuff like that, it's like it's obviously Christian Bale, but there's something demented and nightmarish about this character. I'm like, well, he's pulling in some of that stuff he hasn't done for a while.
Nice.
And he's a really great villain. And for the 10 minutes he's in it, Russell Crowe is absolutely amazing as Zeus, who is a hedonistic, self-centered piece of crap who is the biggest ham and just soaking up all the praise and adulation from his fellow gods, and he just has a blast. And I love every second he's on screen. But Thor: Love and Thunder is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I have to think about it because, like, they said Thor's coming back, so I'm assuming there's going to be a Thor 5 at some point. I do kind of wish Taika Waititi would go and do some like smaller stuff again for a little while. Because like I could use more Hunt for the Wilder People and Jojo Rabbit in my life. I don't
Jojo Rabbit, that was a great film.
yeah. I don't I don't need a third Taika Waititi Thor movie. I feel like I need more of like the other stuff that he does more. And then he's going to do a Star Wars movie too, and apparently direct a bunch of episodes of the next season of The Mandalorian. So like Disney basically has him raking in that money. So I don't blame him. So like you can't really fault him for that. Like this is some dude from New Zealand who started on Flight of the Conchords. So like he's doing pretty great for himself.
He has come very far.
Yeah.
Maybe
And,
they'll just get like Eggers for the next one. Switch up the tone a little bit.
oh my God. I did see somebody say, I want to see a Northman style Thor movie. And I'm like, I don't know if you can handle that. Honestly, like, I don't think, like, if Marvel fans went in and watched like a movie like The Northman, for Thor, they would not be able to handle that. Like most
No,
mainstream audience would not be able to handle that.
that's too sharp. That's too sharp a turn. They would be flying out the other side of the car.
They tried to make Game of Thrones Thor, and it fell flat on its face with Thor: The Dark World, because like that was Alan Taylor from Game of Thrones.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
That
Okay.
well, I don't even blame him. That was just a bad script. Like, it just wasn't interesting.
When I say Peaky Blinders succeeds on so many levels, uh, that movie, The Dark World, the complete opposite. Just didn't feel it. Couldn't get into it. Uh, yeah, I don't even. Once is enough for that movie. Anyway, what
Yeah.
was your other recommendation,
The
Shane?
other recommendation I have, complete 180, is Personal Shopper, and this is it. For the sake of letting all of you know and to be prepared, I'm going to call it a soft horror film, because it is a ghost story, and it's from director Olivier Assayas, who has made a lot of like cinephiles watch his movies. He's
What
actually
was his name again?
Olivier Assayas. It's like Assayaas. Um, and it's starring Kristen Stewart. This was one of her first like legit roles. And she plays a young woman whose twin brother dies, and they're both mediums. And she's trying to speak to the other side, to her brother. And there's some like really creepy and unnerving moments throughout this film. But it also deals with like she's a personal shopper. So like there are a
No,
lot of
no
scenes
spoilers there, I imagine.
she spends a decent amount of scenes just trying on very nice looking clothes. And it's like there's creepy ghost moments, there's creepy stalker moments, there's Kristen Stewart naked and then putting on fancy outfits. It's an interesting movie, but like if you love film and want to have something like challenge you doing something different than what you're used to, I think it's worth checking out.
I love the way you sold that. That was great.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go recommending that to like my brother. I don't think my brother would give a shit about a
Okay.
personal shopper. My brother's speeds much more slasher movies. If he's gonna go horror movies. So, but like I think it's the kind of thing where it's just like if you appreciate what film can do, I think it does a lot of unique and interesting things. Even if not everything comes together. Like there's some moments where it's just like I've seen it like twice or three times. Sometimes I'm even just like, what was that supposed to be? But it has its moments. But you all got some interesting recommendations, a wide variety of them too, range in tones as well. But Jim, thank you as always for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure, Shane.
And thank all of you for tuning in and always supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.